friends, and thanks for listening to the Capital City Soccer Show, your independent source for everything Austin FC. My name is Landon Cottom, and I am joined as always by Mr. Jeremiah Bentley.
Hey everybody, I'm Jeremiah Bentley.
So last episode, we told you we were going to have an interview with Weston Applefeller. That is not the case for reasons that we'll discuss later and that are now apparent to us. But we still have a lot to talk about, and also means you're going to have back-to-back episodes. So we're going to do an episode this week and then another episode next week, which leads me to our next topic is we want to know what you guys want from the show. Like, do you want it every week? Do you like what you're hearing on the show? So we're actually going to put out a little survey. You can find that in the show notes. We'll also be posting it in several places. So please take that survey. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you want to hear on the show. We want to make the show that you guys want to hear. We do this for our own reasons, but we also want you to enjoy listening to it. So please tell us what you want to hear.
And I would really like to hear from you if you don't enjoy listening to the show, but you still do listen to it. Exactly.
Absolutely.
What are you doing to yourself? What's wrong with you? And, how can we make your day better if you're going to force yourself to check the show out?
Yeah. So we want to hear what you like and also what you don't like, but please be nice. Like, we want constructive criticism, but don't just be straight up mean to us, because I don't know if I can handle that right now.
We're real people with real feelings. And we've been doing this a little while, but we're pretty sensitive and we love every download and listen. But yes, please, if you're going to have feedback, make it constructive.
Also, Liverpool got beat really bad today, so Jeremiah's extra sensitive.
I'm feeling very fragile as a Liverpool, Texas Longhorn, and Dallas Cowboys fan over this weekend. Like, it has been a really, really bad weekend for football, no matter how you pronounce it. So yes, make the survey information nice.
Let's talk about some soccer results that went a little bit better. So Austin FC players playing in Copa Libertadores last week. Cecilio Dominguez and Rodney Redis were both playing for Guarani. They beat Tigre 3-1. So Rodney Redis ended up with 2 assists. Dominguez came on in the 66th minute, ended up scoring a goal in the 86th minute. It was a pretty nice goal as well. Jeremiah, did you get a chance to watch this one?
I did not watch the whole match. I just saw the video highlights of it. So I saw both their performances. And Cecilio's goal was pretty amazing. I mean, I saw that all over Twitter.
Yeah. So it's I went back and watched essentially like all of his involvements in the game, and he wasn't super sharp to start with, and throughout the game, like a few heavy touches here and there that led to turnovers, but whenever it counted, he turned it on and was a really nice goal. So there's a ball chipped over the top. The goalkeeper came off the line to try to get the ball. Cecilio takes a touch around him to get to the inline, and then cut it back towards the penalty spot and went by another defender, and then hit it with his left foot past the defender who was waiting on the goal line. So it was a pretty impressive looking goal. And like I said, Rodney got 2 assists. One of them was just kind of hit into the box and a giant center back got it on his head. But the second one, I think, was a pretty intentional one. Florentine, number 7, I think is his name, started kind of towards the top of the box and then made a run kind of towards the near post towards Rodney, and Rodney put it right on his head, and the guy got his head on it and put it into the far post. So that one was really nice, and I think was pretty intentional. And then Rodney also almost scored a goal in the 88th minute, put it off the left post and just kind of kissed it off the edge of the post there. But overall, quite good. They'll be playing the last group match against Bolivar in La Paz on October 21st. The most likely scenario right now is them finishing second in the group and advancing to the knockout stage. There's a slim chance of them actually winning the group. It doesn't look like that's very likely due to who Palmeiras is playing, but so we're going to get to see Rodney and Cecilio play in some knockout round soccer in Copa Libertadores. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and I think reflecting on sort of our last show, I know one of the things that we were hoping to see was that Cecilio and Rodney would be on the field at the same time, and and that happened.
Yeah.
That's time for the first match. Now, I know also you said Rodney was pretty. I'll go with sluggish. You might have said lazy, but we'll just say that he was sluggish last time out. And
I wouldn't say lazy. I just think he didn't look very good.
Okay, with that. So, but obviously his work rate was. I mean, or maybe not his work rate, but he obviously made a way bigger difference this time. Could you tell sort of the difference in his play?
Yeah, I think this game was. I think on the last episode I mentioned that he didn't look very good, but it was kind of uncharacteristic for him. I think this game was pretty representative of what I've seen from him so far since the restart. He wasn't super influential in the game, but was useful. Tracked back, did some really good defensive work, some good link up play. I still think there's something like he needs to kind of turn a corner for me to really be impressed with him, and I think playing style could affect that some. But again, he's still young and has some growing and some learning to do. So hopefully Josh Wolf will be able to do that for him. But yeah, from what we've seen from Dominguez so far, even though it has come in flashes, kind of, he hasn't played in a while. So I am more and more optimistic as we see more from him as to what he's going to be able to do in MLS. Let's move on to talk about some other Austin FC players. So the Austin FC Academy teams went to Houston 2 weekends in a row. I believe, did we talk about the last trip on the last show?
We did talk about the last trip of the last show.
Okay. So yeah, they ended up going to Houston again to play Dynamo Unidos, which is, I think it's like an affiliate team of the Houston Dynamo Academy. But all three teams won again. U15s won 3-1, U14s won 2-1, U13s won 4-0. They were supposed to go to Dallas to play Solar SC this weekend, but I think those are all postponed. So we'll see when those get rescheduled. I did see some interviews with Tyson. I believe it was in Phil West's article. And then I heard another interview elsewhere, and he mentioned this in both places, where he's saying that the travel has really helped the team chemistry, and that you can really tell they're starting to kind of gel as a team. And Jeremiah, you played high school sports, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, he talks about like on the bus rides, like playing games together, and just like how, like, you remember how much fun road trips were whenever you were that age. So yeah, I can really see how that works.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. I mean, for me, that was, well, we weren't very good, especially at football. So the bus ride was actually the best part of the entire experience. Usually, the bus ride there, the bus ride home was never good because we were usually 4 or 5 touchdowns in defeat. But yeah, the bus ride up was always neat. One of the things that I've really enjoyed that I think is really cool is just the coverage. So we had on the Academy Twitter page, they had a video preview of the match, or I guess of the matches against Houston, and then just having somebody like Phil West writing articles about the results for the official club website is so different than it was last year. And it makes it a lot easier to get into and follow these players. And then it's just a nice touch in terms of really making the club, official and a part of the community and a part of the soccer community, to have all this coverage that we didn't have last year.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really cool, and it's gonna be cool to see some of these kids kind of turn into stars. And like they're like we said, we've talked about this a lot over the last year, but these are the first players wearing the Austin FC badge on a field. So I don't know if they feel it, but there might be a little bit of pressure on them. And Tyson talks about this a lot, is kind of balancing development versus results. And I think especially U13s, U14s, they're going to really focus on the development aspect and aren't going to stress the results so much. They want to win, but if they have a choice of doing something that would help them win versus helping develop these players better, they're going to choose the development side of it. Whereas U15s and U17s is where he says that's when the competition starts. Then, like, we're going to try to win those games. And that's really the age when you can start putting pressure on them and start really making it like, okay, if you want to be a professional player, this is when you make it happen. It doesn't happen when you're 20 years old. It's too late by then. So like the U15 level is where that starts. And so I wanted to talk about the U15's results so far. So I looked up kind of rankings on Top Drawer Soccer, which is the top youth soccer publication in the country. Granted, these are rankings from March 2020 of teams that maybe these people haven't even seen play, but we know who has good academies, right? So as of March 2020 and the U15 level, FC Dallas was ranked 4th, Dallas Texans was ranked 15th, Houston Dynamo was ranked 16th, San Antonio FC is ranked 18th, and then Solar Soccer Clubs, the academies were supposed to play this weekend, are always kind of in those top levels as well. So far, the Austin FC U15s have beat Houston Dynamo. They've beaten San Antonio FC. So I will be very interested to see when they play FC Dallas and some of the other Dallas teams, how they do against them. Because if they're regularly beating these academy teams who are thought of as some of the best in the country, then I think that really shows what kind of trajectory this academy system is going to be on.
Yeah, and you saw San Antonio FC. I mean, that was a huge win, right? That was a significant win. And then Houston was, 3-1? I mean, they're beating them soundly too. They're not just beating them.
Yeah. So it's, again, it's a small sample size, but it'll be really interesting to see how they end up going up against these top ranked academy clubs in the country. And so far they've beaten them all. So, we'll be keeping an eye on that.
And one thing I was going to add in, just as on the balance thing, I find as fans, if they were losing, I would be talking about how it didn't really matter because this is all about development. But now that they're winning, right? It's like, oh yeah, we're beating people and results are all that, the score is all that matters. Like I'm an American sports fan and like, who cares whether the players get better as long as we win? Is that how I'm supposed to take it?
Yeah, I think so. Let's move on to some other Austin FC news. So Jeremiah, Austin FC has released a video of laying down some of the turf. So I think that's probably the reason why Weston wasn't available to do an interview last week. And so I think it's because the grass got delivered from Arizona. So they're starting to lay it down on, I believe the video showed it's only being laid down on the training facility right now, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. I've only seen it at the training facility. Did you watch the video? I watched it twice.
I did.
That was really well done. And the music was really good. And I did learn the term seashore pass. Oh man.
Seashore paspalum, I think is how he said it.
Yeah. Yeah, which apparently is the first, will be the first club to use it on a soccer pitch, but it'll also be used in Qatar in 2022. And another thing that I thought was really interesting, like I don't understand why they grew the grass in Arizona, but did you catch that part?
Yeah, it's like I looked it up and there's just like grass farms there. It's sunny all the time. And I think they mentioned this in the video as well. It's like, that the sun is shining all the time. And so it's very predictable and the growing pattern that it's going to have there. And so if you look up a Google Maps view of Scottsdale, Arizona, out like on the eastern side of town, there's this huge area that's all grass farm. And so it's just, that's where you grow your grass if you need a bunch of grass. So that's why they did it there.
That's really cool. Yeah, I did see the guy. I don't remember because I guess there's a turf company, right? That all consults with these people that has, Lord knows how many different types of grass they have growing out there, but they found exactly what they wanted for the club. Yeah.
Going to be shipped all over the country, I imagine too. And so, yeah, you mentioned this type of grass this is the first place it's being used, but we'll get to talk to Weston about this a lot more on the next episode about why they chose that grass, why it's going to work well here, and what they'll have to do to take care of it. But you mentioned the video work that was done. The club has actually brought on 2 new employees only doing video work, which I think is something that they needed to do. You could tell before that they mostly just were pointing a camera at something and doing it, which they were fine. But the stuff that's come out over the last month or two is like really top level video work, and it's been some really cool stuff. So I'm excited to see what else they're able to do.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed the way they've been able to tell a story through that. And we'll get into the most controversial topic of this whole thing in a little bit. and the video is a part of that. But we've already talked about the grass video was really well done, and I think they'll probably do more of those. And then the Academy video previews are really well done too, and they've really upped their level of storytelling through video. And it's a consistent professional message, and it's been something that's been really good to see. And also it makes show prep a lot easier because I can walk around the house and watch video. So I'm glad that they did that for us too.
Another place they've done upgrades is on the website. So was there anything else about the website that caught your eye, Jeremiah?
One thing that's really been interesting is that there's a news page and just the frequency of the news. Because if you remember before, the only time we would get news is when they would put a press release out, and that release would show up on the site. But there's stories about the Copa Libertadores game. There's the videos, all the announcement, just the quantity of the content, the availability of it has been impressive, and so it's good to see ramping that up as we get toward the season.
There's also a section about the 4ATX Foundation, which has kind of gone through some changes, some positive changes recently. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, the 4ATX Foundation, originally it was Upper 90, right? They brought on Caitlin, they brought in the programming, and it was really just them running that programming. But in addition to that, they're also going to do funding around community issues and support a variety of items. And so they sort of produced their first set of community pillars that they put on the website and put out, along with them launching the Twitter account for the foundation. And they have 3 main areas they're working in. One is inclusivity through equity. The second one is vibrancy through sustainability. And then the third is confidence for creativity. And I think those all make sense for a soccer team, and they make sense for Austin. And I think it really shows that they've took some time to plug into like what this community is all about and develop philanthropic pillars that really reflect that vision and sort of reflect what Austin's about.
Yeah, I remember when we had Caitlin on the show, she said that they were still working on kind of their mission statement and what the organization was going to be all about. And I think this is what that is. So it's really cool to see the progress that they're making. They've also kind of rebranded the Upper 90 portion of it as well. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, they took that and they've rebranded that as Verde Leaders, which fits with everything that's going on around the club and how the club's using that term so much. And they've also put out some content too on the 4ATX Foundation Twitter page that really talks about that program, talks about social emotional learning and sort of what that leadership means, which is good to see because it's more digestible than just the concept. But that's been good to see too. And another thing they put out on October 1st, I think, is if you remember back, I think it was back when we talked to Caitlin before. It was right when all right when the George Floyd thing happened and there was all this uproar. And
yeah, that's right.
She talked about their commitment to equity, and they made that statement, I think, back mid-June about that. And then just recently on October 1st, they put a statement out on their website and then on all their social media platforms about their commitment to racial equity. And they were looking for input from the community. So I thought it was good that they didn't just make that statement once, but they kept talking about it and kept emphasizing that. And so they're still collecting feedback on their social media platforms about what's important in terms of anti-racism work and what's important in terms of social justice.
Yeah. So if any of you listening here have some thoughts on things that they can do or want to give some feedback, then check out that post and let the club know what you're thinking. All right, let's move on to the most controversial topic of the show, as Jeremiah foreshadowed earlier. So Austin FC named their official domestic beer partner as Michelob Ultra. So Jeremiah, what was your gut reaction when you saw that?
Well, I love how you wrote in the show notes, "Do we revolt?" ? I feel like that was a really good. Am I surprised? Not at all. I mean, you have to have a giant macro beer as your official domestic beer partner. As much as we and the people that we talk to who are in our bubble love craft beer, giant beer is that way because that's what most people consume. So, yeah, it's okay. I wasn't super surprised by that. And I guess, I don't know about you, but I would prefer Michelob Ultra over Heineken if choosing my giant partner beers. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
I like it doesn't matter. I'm not gonna get that anyway. So like I'm not buying it. I don't care what it is. I with your first statement though, I completely agree. I feel like there are like we do kind of live in a beer snob bubble, which we'll talk more about here in a second. But I think there's a lot of people that were like actually really upset about this, and like I don't know what they expected. Like the like Electric Jellyfish from Austin from Pine House Pizza is not going to be the official beer of Austin FC. Like it's just not. Like it's beer money makes the sports world go around, right? Like they pay the bills, they keep the lights on, and so it was always going to be like one of these huge macro breweries sponsoring the team. So yeah, again, it's just part of being a big professional sports team. So Troy did note in a recent Capital City Soccer article that it is specified as the domestic beer partner, which leaves possibilities for partnerships with local craft or maybe international beer. I don't know what that would be, but hopefully the answer is partnerships with some local craft breweries. So digging into what this partnership actually means. So Brown Distributing, which is the big alcohol distributor in the Austin area, is going to be the distributor as part of this partnership with Anheuser-Busch. And so I dug into what breweries they actually carry, like what are the brands that Brown actually carries. And there are some local craft breweries on this list. So I decided to post a link to that list on Twitter and do another one of my super scientific Twitter polls. And I asked Austin FC fans if, looking at this list, if those were the only beers available, would you be okay with that? And so we'll talk about some of those breweries here in a second. But whenever you saw the poll go up, Jeremiah, what did you expect the results to look like?
Can you remind me of what the options were? Because they were just yes or no.
It was essentially yes or no. It was like, yes, this list looks good. No way, more local craft.
So I answered no way, more local craft, and I expected 75% of people to answer that also too. But when I filled it out, it was pretty close. I don't know what the final results were, but what were they, Landon?
So the final results were 43% said, yes, this looks good. And 57% said, no, we want more local craft beer, which is much closer than I expected it to be initially. For a long time yesterday, it was 50-50, like dead even. And I showed this list to my wife and I showed her the breweries, and I kind of, again, Jeremiah and I are kind of beer snobs and we'll own that. And I showed this list to my wife and she kind of put me in my place. And I showed her the list of beers. And so let me read the list of local craft breweries that are actually distributed by Brown and could potentially be available at the stadium. So Altstadt Brewing, Austin East Ciders, Celis Brewing, High Sign Brewing, Independence Brewing, Pint House Pizza, Twisted X Brewing, Whitestone Brewing, and then Mighty Swell Spiked Seltzer is available. I showed this to my wife and she was like, Landon, that's pretty good. Like if you could get those at a professional sports game, then you're doing pretty good for yourself. And it like kind of made me take a step back and be like, she's right, actually. Like most professional sports games you go to, like it's going to be Miller, Bud, Michelob, whatever, like something like that. And then maybe here in Austin, like you'll get like Karbach as the craft, quote unquote, craft beer, which is owned by Anheuser-Busch and distributed by Anheuser-Busch and is not really craft beer, but it gets passed off as craft beer at a lot of big venues here in Austin. So if we could get even a handful of those breweries that I just listed actually available in the stadium, then that would be, it's a pretty good spread. Are there breweries I would like to see instead of some of these, or breweries I think are better than these? Absolutely. Yeah, that's 100%. But if we could see Pint House Pizza beer on draft in McCalla Place, that would be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that would be really good. I think there was two specific brands that fall outside of that I really, really want to see. And I think maybe they're the same ones I believe you asked this in Slack, and I think Derek gave the same answers. Like any list that doesn't include Austin Beer Works, I'm going to feel is incomplete. And a little bit the same way about Live Oak. And I feel like they've got fairly broad distribution, generally throughout the city. But to your point, that's a pretty decent selection. If everything distributed by Brown or some subset of those end up at the stadium, it'll probably be okay. But I do think it's important that we as the fans keep. I don't know if it's pressure. Like I don't know if like getting excited about craft brew is something that like is applying fan pressure, but like keep talking about it and keep expressing our preferences. And one of the things that I did was I went and looked. I think we talked before about Levy being the concession manager. So I went and looked around at like other places that Levy did and found a really good article about what they had done at Wrigley Field. And like Wrigley Field over the last few years has gone to like a really broad selection of craft beer. And so that we know that Levy can do that if the owners of the team that they're supporting are really pushing for that. So I think that's where, like, hey, Austin FC people, if you're listening, we love our craft beer. So let's get as much of it as possible.
Yeah. Brian Mangum pointed this out, and he said that it's actually a licensing violation to have an exclusive distribution arrangement. And so it's actually against their licensing rules to only offer these beers. But he also said that companies like Brown and Levy do that all the time and then just pay the fines. And so you can find venues that are operated by Brown and Levy who are probably only have macro brews available. So there are places like Wrigley Field, like you mentioned, where there are the best of both worlds. So I really think it's up to the owner of the venue or the manager of the venue. So Austin FC will have a say in these things.
That's good. And so let's just keep making sure that they know that those are the things we care about. And one of the other things they did, and we mentioned the video content a little bit earlier, was they launched this partnership with a video featuring the owner of Rustic Tap. And did you watch that?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good, and it was a good place to start because that's really more than any other place. I guess that's kind of the official bar of Austin FC, right?
Yeah, it's where the official MLS announcement was, and they had the year anniversary, and then there's been some other events there as well.
We did the Austin Anthem South by Southwest.
Yeah, the South by Southwest event there as well. Yeah, so it is tied up into the lore of Austin FC for sure.
Yeah, and they've got, I think they when they did that, they said there would be at least 3 of those. But I thought that was a little bit of a neat way to introduce the partnership and really tie it into Austin was to feature that venue. So I look forward to seeing other places that they're going to talk about and kind of other venues that help tell the story of the club.
All right, let's move on and talk about some MLS news and what we think the 2021 season is going to look like. So I kind of been operating under the assumption that the 2021 season would be postponed and would start later than normal. We've talked about this in other shows, but MLS clubs rely on the gate money and on concessions money to turn profits. And so if they can push it back a few months and get twice as many people into the stadium at that point, I think they're going to try to do that. But on a recent Sports Business Journal podcast, Andy Loughnane was the guest on one and was talking about this. And he made a point that I hadn't really thought of, which was that it's not going to be entirely up to MLS clubs to choose on that. And the main point he brought up was the teams that share venues. And so it's going to be those teams who are playing in NFL stadiums that the farther you push the MLS season back, the more overlap there's going to be with the NFL season. And so he acted like he was kind of under the assumption that we're going to start pretty close on time. So maybe the season would start a little bit late, but Andy Loughnane seems to think it's not going to be too late.
Yeah, and he talked about that over and over again, that in a perfect world, or if it was just up to him, or I don't remember all the phrases he used exactly, but that moving it back would make a lot of sense. But really, when you think about it, with MLS, most of the matches are on the weekend, and obviously almost all the NFL games are on the weekend. And we've got the good fortune in Austin to have a soccer specific stadium, but there are plenty of very successful franchises. Seattle, for example, is a really good example.
Seattle, Atlanta, Nashville, New England. There's probably others that I'm not thinking of, but there are more than a handful of teams who share NFL stadiums.
Yeah, and they're never going to be the primary tenant of those buildings. So that really is a complicating factor. So yeah, I don't know what another good solution is. You don't want to make the season any shorter. You don't want to be playing more. I mean, you could always play more games during a week to get it going, but then the quality of play suffers. So that was surprising to me too, because it's not something I'd really thought about. I just always assumed like, we'll just start in May or start in June or whatever it is until we'll start when we can have full stadiums again. But that apparently is not the case.
Yeah, so that'll be something interesting to keep our eyes on. Another little piece of news that came out is Axel Schuster, who is the Vancouver Whitecaps CEO and sporting director, recently said in an interview, was talking about a new roster rule that Paul Tenorio and Sam Stejskal have lovingly named Young Money. And so Schuster essentially talked about it like this is happening, which before it was kind of a rumor and it was something that was agreed upon in the collective bargaining agreement that happened earlier this year, but it was agreed upon, but hadn't been put into place yet. And we weren't sure if it actually ever would be, but this would essentially be 3 additional roster spots. They have to be 22 years old or younger. It's not an unlimited spend like a designated player would be, but it's going to be a higher salary than your standard player. So it would essentially be 6 roster spots that you could spend more money on, plus the Jeremiah's favorite topic, TAM, targeted allocation money, that you could use to go over your salary budget essentially. So it would significantly expand the amount of spending that teams would be allowed to do. Paul Tenorio on his podcast Allocation Disorder talked about how he wasn't so sure about this rule because he thought that it would put unnecessary pressure on these young players, because of essentially by bringing in a young player and saying like, you're one of our guys, like you're one of the guys, it would put undue pressure on them. But I kind of disagree with that. I think there is pressure on these designated players, because it's different than other leagues, right? Like in MLS, if you buy a player, like an expensive player, and he doesn't do well, let's take Chicharito, for example. He still hasn't scored a goal, right? I think there's still a good chance he could come good, but if you take a chance on like a young player coming in and you spend a bunch of money on him and he just isn't good. In MLS, you can't just go buy another player. Like in England, if you buy a bad player, it didn't work out, okay, we'll just buy another one. In MLS, the rules don't allow that. So even if you have the money to do it, you can't do it. And so there's a lot of pressure, I think more so on GMs of clubs and sporting directors of clubs to get it right every time. But I'm kind of the opinion, you can tell me what you think about this, Jeremiah. I'm kind of the opinion by expanding the number of players that are getting paid more, it's kind of spreading that pressure around. And so if there are 6 players that you're paying a lot of money, there's not as much pressure on any one of them, but you have a higher chance of 3 or 4 or 5 of them working out. And if one doesn't, then those are the breaks. But if the other 5 do, then that's still a pretty good hit rate.
Yeah. Well, first of all, this is like the kind of thing that I hate about MLS, like this very vague. I mean, it's kind of like this and kind of like that. And you can use some TAM maybe, but not, but also like it's annoying. But yeah, I mean, the basic point that, the more that you have these types of players, the less individual pressure it is on every one of them. And that's absolutely true, because you're spreading the risk and you're spreading the pressure. And this is, well, you mentioned Euro. That's I think that's a really big difference. We talked about that, I guess, on the bike ride, right? We could, or when we rode the bikes to Hop Squad a couple of weeks ago about, yeah, just the chance that if you make a miss, it's sure it costs money, but that's all it costs. And that is definitely a unique MLS thing. So I think it'll be really interesting to see how it plays out. And then to see how many clubs take advantage of it too, because one of the reasons that you have all these weird rules is to level the playing field, right? So that everybody's spending in a certain bracket of money. But at some point, if you have so many of these, then you really do start to get into a position of haves and have-nots. And so it'll be interesting to see who takes advantage of this, who really benefits from it, and how it plays out in practicality.
Yeah, so a player like Rodney Redis could fit into this category for Austin FC. Another point that Paul and Sam made on allocation disorder is that Pellegrini for Miami would probably fall into this category, depending on what the spending limits are. But if that were true, that would open up another designated player spot for Miami, which means if they get Blaise Matuidi on a TAM deal and then have Pellegrini move to like this young money slot, if they brought in another designated player, then that means Miami's gonna be for real at some point. So that would be an interesting thing to watch. But I think the goal of this, Don Garber has said that he wants MLS to become a selling league, right? And so if you're giving teams an option to bring in these young players, the goal would be to sell them to Europe for a lot more money than what you paid for them. And I think this is kind of feeding into that. But I think overall it would be a positive. It's spending more money on players, which is what is going to make this league better. Some people would say that by putting these weird limits and weird rules on it, that it's not really moving anything forward. But I'll take it. Like if it's going to be spending more money on players, I think it's going to raise the quality of the league.
And to your point about the GMs, I think it rewards the teams with creative and better GMs, because every one of these spots has its own, interesting conditions and its own peculiarities. And the GM that can figure it out and really make the best use of all these things, they're going to have a clear advantage for the club. And maybe that's where somewhat, Austin having a sporting director that's so familiar with the way that the league works is really going to be an advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also if you're bringing in, like, if you're going to be a team that's going to focus on your youth system, this could be a way to maybe bring some of these players into the first team without having to make them a designated player, and maybe keep them around for a year or two longer than you would have to kind of develop them before you sell them on. So I think you're right. I think it does open up more ways for a team to be good, because as of right now, you essentially, the teams that spend money on good designated players do well, and the other ones don't necessarily. So I think anything that kind of makes it, just opens up the rules a little bit, rewards that creativity that you were talking about. And again, it'll be interesting to see what Claudio and Josh do with these new rules as well, and kind of see how they take advantage of them. All right. Anything else, Jeremiah, before we wrap up?
No, I think we're ready to wrap it up.
All right. We want to remind you to rate, review, and subscribe this podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
We'd also like to remind you to visit capitalcitysoccer.com. One of the things that they do every month that Troy provides is sort of a countdown to 2021 with the breaking news for the month. So I think just this week they published the highlights from September. We also like to remind you to be on the lookout for a listener survey that gives us input on how we want to move the show forward together in the direction that all of you want.
All right. We'll be back next week with more Austin FC news and an interview with Weston Applefeller, the Senior Director of Grounds for Austin FC. Until then, I'm Landon Cottom.
I'm Jeremiah Bentley.
We'll catch you next time. Until then, I'm Landon Cottom.
I'm Jeremiah Bentley.
Do that again.
I'm Jeremiah Bentley. Maybe. I'm Ron Burgundy.